Many people have problems with art and not with reality.
So why is art different?
It's pretty simple, right?
This is knowledge, this is thinking, this is thought.
Yeah, it does something strange with your head.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair.
Bring it.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair. My name is Ando. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. Thank you for letting me into your head. I have to start out with my sincere apologies for the delay in releasing this episode. The logistics and timing gods have been especially hard on this program lately, but it does look like things are turning around. We have a lot of good stuff coming up. So this is episode 100, huh? It's been over 3 years of this program, 100 guests, a lot of ups and downs. I don't really want to spend too much time here reflecting and or being nostalgic, but I would like to say that it has been an honor to have the chance to even do this, ups and downs included. But you, the listeners, you keep me at this. And of course, the many great guests who have graced this program since it started. I am very thankful to each and every one of you, and also to all the galleries who've been supportive along the way. And I'm not kidding when I say it still feels like we are just getting started. Did I mention that Tal R is the special guest for the 100th episode? I'll get back to that in a second. I do want to thank specifically Statens Kunstfond for their support. I want to thank Gallery V1, Bo Bjergård, and all the other galleries who've helped along the way. Anas, Sine, and the Europe team, shout out to them. Each and every guest who has generously given their time to come on and listen to my inane blather. And finally, again, to you, the listeners. I'm going to be traveling, so things will be a little light here during the summer, but we can look forward to a lot of great stuff happening in the fall, upcoming collaborations, etc., and etc. And apropos collaboration, be sure to come out this Sunday at 2 p.m., and take part in a live podcast recording / artist talk with Peter Voss Knude and I at Overgaden. We'll be talking about a crazy project he's done with the Danish military. It should be a lot of fun. It's your chance to see the show live. So, did I mention that Tal R is the special guest for episode number 100? I can only assume he needs no introduction, right? He has a huge show up at Louisiana. He makes great work. And turns out I really love the way he talks about art. So go see his show if you haven't already. Go see the show again if you have. I don't care. And yeah, that's it. Tal R, onwards to the next 100. But I did notice you were talking about your dad and having a father who didn't. You said circus Danish, which is a very great expression. Mm-hmm. People have spoken about my Danish a lot, about being circus Danish.
Oh yeah,
which as someone who speaks English, you'd think that is you're saying, oh, it's bad, but what you're saying is it's traveling Danish. It's people who travel in and out of Denmark speak a certain level of Danish. So if you're in a traveling show, you might speak this level.
Yeah. You can also meet people who speak almost perfect Danish, but you sense there is another kind of rhythm in their language.
I think that's me.
You just can't. It's nothing to do with the pronunciation. There's just where you put the pressure in the language. It's because there is another language, and I guess in the brain, it makes a different Danish. I really like that. I think it's great that this exists.
Well, I think maybe one of the reasons Danish is so unflexible as a language is the lack of foreigners speaking it. English is super flexible. Yeah. It's pulled in all sorts of directions.
You feel this more in America than if you go to Britain. You don't feel the same. In America,
I guess you're right.
It's like it's really a flexible language. In England, you feel more stressed, not speaking properly.
Right, making sure it's stiff upper lip, proper.
No, but it's more about also the humor. The humor is so much between the words in London that you, as a non, when you have English as your second language, you get more aware that you don't belong in that language.
Yeah.
In America, it's like everybody have a stock in that language.
Right. Nobody owns it.
No.
It's for everybody in that sense. Well, it's funny because I tried to do that with Danish when I got here, and people would just constantly say to me, I understand what you're trying to say, but that's not how you say that.
Yeah.
You know,
that's interesting.
It's just, you know, that's not the correct way to express that.
No.
And that was just from translating from English to Danish, kind of directly. Were you raised speaking Danish, or did you guys speak Hebrew?
No, I was raised speaking Danish, but my parents, they spoke English, actually.
Ah.
Because my father only slowly learned Danish, so when I was a child, they spoke English, and if it had to be secret, they would switch to Hebrew, which I could understand a little of it, but not all.
Is your mom Danish?
My mother's Danish, but she speaks Hebrew.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean it's kind of interesting growing up with a foreign father in a country, you know, in a separate country.
It simply means that you belong and you don't. And when you are a child, that's not so nice. But when you get older, I think it's an advantage, because that means that you're like inside and outside. And that's not bad.
Yeah,
it's only bad when you're a child. You just want to belong. You just want to be like everybody.
Right. Why is my dad so weird?
Yeah, and you feel embarrassed not being like everybody. So only when you get older you appreciate being different. Kids, they just want to be like everybody. They just want to melt in.
Right. Yeah, right. It has, you know, the more normal, the better.
Yeah.
Which is perfect in a country like Denmark. You know, it just strikes me as kind of like there really is a lot of normative behavior here, and it's all about being, you know, like you're weird if your parents come from Jutland and you grew up in Copenhagen. You know, that's about as exotic as it gets. Yeah, I hope that's changing. I think that's changing. But, you know, I imagine for you it was pretty wild just being like, you know, people would be like, Israel? Where's what? You know? Like,
yeah, I mean, yeah, for me growing up, I mean, I went to a Jewish school, so half of the day I was among similar kids that were like a blend of fathers from one place and mothers from another place. But the moment you got home on your street and you ring the doorbell of the neighbor kid, the whole circus starts.
Right.
What kind of weird name is that? And why do you have salad? Why do you eat avocado? You know, that was very exotic things in the 70s.
That's right. Avocado was not a thing here.
No. And
yeah, it's you're right. It is an advantage later, but it is strange in the beginning. Did you live in Israel ever? Was there ever a connection? Because I had that.
No, we actually left when I was like a child. We left exactly after the 6-Day War, which was now, which was this kind of like legendary war where everybody thought that Israel was going to be run over by all the different surrounding Arab countries, and it didn't happen. And my father was in the army when I was born, and I think I think it has nothing to do with the war. We had family in Canada and we had family in Denmark, and I think my father wanted to go to Canada, but my mother said if we're going somewhere else in Israel, we're going to go back to Denmark. So they moved to Rødovre.
World famous Rødovre.
Yeah, and on Vojensvej.
Is that where you grew up?
That was the first year, and then they bought a house in Valby, which is like just next to Rødovre and Hvidovre, and then I grew up in Valby there. That
was darker times in Valby, wasn't it? It's all nice now, but I've heard it was a little rougher around the edges.
Valby was a mix of like middle class and then kind of more working class and more rough areas. I think I really loved it, but I don't think it was pretty, or I don't think it was something special. I just really liked it, and I was a kid full of imagination, and I would find places for imagination. It doesn't take more than a matchbox to create a whole world, and I did this, and I think the mix of going to a Jewish school and then going to Valby was a quite good mix.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's also like, it could also be a recipe of a disaster.
Right. I mean, that could be the beginning of a slow overtone for a horrible story, you know?
Yeah, sure. It's, in a way, it's quite neutral. It sounds, it's like when you do a party and you invite a lot of very different people from work, old people, kids, you know, it's a possibility of a disaster. But then suddenly, when you think of it, it was like a wonder. And I think my upbringing was a wonder.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that, I think we were pretty much, you know, left alone a lot, you know. Both of my parents were working, which is not, it's quite ordinary. They both work.
Sure. Go outside, kids.
Yeah, you just go out and you play in the backyard, you play in the front garden, you play in the basement, you walk around a lot. And at that time, Valby was more suburbia, which meant the areas next to the train, there was a lot of these kind of middle areas. They were not really countryside, but they were just between the railroad and the kind of industrial areas.
Urban open spaces.
Yeah, and this was the places we were playing. And there would be all these kind of factories that they were closed, that you could kind of crawl in through a window, and it seems like every time you entered a building that was like shut down, you would always find things that were even older. Like for instance, in Valby there was the old Rex coffee factory, which was actually not coffee. It was something they made, I think, out of corn. They made something that should be like coffee during the war.
During the wartime. Yeah, when you couldn't get coffee.
So suddenly it's 1975, you crawl through a window, and then you are in 44. And I think that's how I felt a lot during my childhood, that there were all these doors and windows, and it would be 74, 78, but when you entered this door, this window, it would be 38, 43, or just 56.
Time traveling portals.
It was like, that's how I remember it. It was always about, or there would be a rundown grocery store that just was shut for 10 years. And somehow you would get in there. You know, there would be some older kids that had a trick to open the door, and there would still be old groceries, like packets of cornflakes that were 10 years old, and you would just for a second smell the other era.
Right.
And I think it's all about, you know, when I grew up in the 70s, there was all these doors and corridors and windows to other times. And I think actually it's still like that. If you grow up, maybe today all the doors and corridors, they are on children's telephones and iPads. But if you take them away and you let kids out in the street, they will sense the same. That actually what's amazing about a city, that it's for the living and it's also for the dead. I don't mean it in a superficial way, like not superficial, in a supernatural way. I just mean that part of the city is built by people who are not there anymore. So somehow they're still present.
Right, the layers on top of each other.
There are all these layers, and the more boredom, the more you have a chance to sense this.
It's true. Boredom is such a powerful force for kids.
Yes.
And just what are we going to do? We have to go do something.
Yeah, and I think I haven't been good enough to treat my kids to that kind of boredom that developed me.
Well, it's easier to treat boredom now.
Yes.
You know, when you were growing up, maybe you had a pack of cards, a board game,
and we had, I think,
some drawing materials.
There's certain games that disappeared. I don't know. I think it's different in America. You know what was you could always ask other kids on the street, do you want to play Cowboy and Indians?
Sure.
I think that wouldn't be politically correct in the States.
No.
But actually,
but we did anyways. Or Cops and Robbers.
Cops and Robbers. We would even play Workers, even though we grew up in a working class area.
Oh, like factory working, like
that
building.
That would be take a shovel and go and dig a hole.
Yeah.
We played Workers,
yeah.
And then we would drink a beer. That would be playing. But
smoke a fake cigarette.
But I think nobody plays Cowboys and Indians anymore. It doesn't exist. Maybe you can play Refugee today or Terrorist. If it would be today and I was a kid, we play Terrorist and terrorist cops.
How about Brexit negotiations?
That would be a very advanced. That would be like academic kids.
The kids of political science.
Yes. No, but it didn't. I mean, if we played cowboy and Indians, it was to be an Indian was not less than being a cowboy.
Sure.
It just had different. It was different fantasy.
Symbolism.
Yeah, and I would say Indians, they would be more clever. Cowboys would be more well equipped, but less smart, and they would also be drunk.
Drunk and not sneaky.
Not sneaky. Indian, there would be something having a knife in your teeth and crawling towards your enemy. And every kid had their own shooting sound. And if you take
That's true.
people my age and you say, lie down, close your eyes, let me hear your shouting, your shooting sound. I think for most adults, you can still know which kind of shooting sound they have.
Do you remember yours?
That's mine.
Mine was more like...
Because you were a machine gun.
Yeah, I was an American.
Yeah, you were advanced.
I remember trying to teach my sister how to do that, and she just couldn't. She had her whole different shooting noise. So I think you're absolutely right. It's kind of like a genetic thing. The gene for shooting noises.
Yeah. I mean, my girlfriend, she keeps wanting to buy dress for our son. And I say, for every dress she's going to buy for the boy, I'm going to buy him a gun.
It's modern times, right? I mean, that's popular.
No, it's fine. He can have a flamingo dress from the flea market, but then he can also have an M16.
Mm-hmm. Then he can choose.
He can choose, and he can be a boy in a flamingo dress with a gun. I think that's a nice image.
Yeah, I mean, that's there's a lot of talk about, kids aren't bored anymore, and kids, the iPads and oh Jesus, but at the same time, there is other freedoms that have come. Mm-hmm. I remember a family member had a son who was probably about 20 years old now, and his father, the kid really wanted a dollhouse and said, over my dead body, my son will have a dollhouse.
Yeah.
There's no fucking way.
Yeah.
We're not raising this kid to be like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's so...
I think that changed. I don't know, but I think that would be much more accepted today. Depending
on where, of course, and how. But one thing that was interesting, especially when we talk about boredom, one of the things I'm really fascinated in is why we do what we do. And I loved that you were talking about how you didn't have any feeling for art. You didn't grow up being like, I'm going to be an artist. Because I had the same thing. I had no idea. I had a vague idea there was museums, there was art in there, but I didn't connect that with a job that somebody did.
I grew up drawing because that was something that existed. I don't know how much it exists today.
You don't think so?
I think it's much more something you have to put in front of kids when they are more than 5 years old. Because now all these games on the phone and the iPad has taken that kind of possibility. I am not going to judge whether this is good or bad. I also noticed that, when we were kids, you develop a handwriting. Your way of doing the different letters and I think that was very important whenever you got a new textbook in school, how to write your name. And I would constantly play with the style of writing my name. And writing and drawing was closely connected. I mean, of course, one thing is words and one thing is a drawing, but there is a thin line between these two things. And you would get feelings for every letter.
Yeah.
Not this kind of like emotion, but you will have a sense for the S, a sense for the T, small t, large t, or if it was like in a running manner or... So I was a drawing kid, and for some reason I kept doing it after when I got into puberty. Usually that's when people stop.
Soccer.
Yes, yeah, and I was never playing soccer. Like, of course I would go out on the street, but I was never into these things. I was in, and for some reason I was always into doing things on my own. I think that's also part of growing up in a busy family. We were 4 kids, and there was like always a lot of people in the house. So to create a room where you could have your own fantasy. Drawing was perfect for that. It was an absolutely private, non-ambitious, free space.
And so non-ambitious that you never considered it anything else than just an act.
I did, because when I was around 14 in Danish schools, you have to go to something called erhvervspraktik. It means that you have to go and be in some, business for a week to learn what real life is about. And then I thought, okay, if I like to draw, maybe I heard that if you work in the advertisement business, then it's good to draw. So I tried to go to be in an advertisement bureau.
So you're thinking illustration, or some sort of
but
technical.
Already around 1981, it was gone. Nobody was drawing anymore in these advertisement places. Then also I thought, okay, maybe I could do cartoons. But I remember I went to this guy for a week that was doing cartoons, and he let me paint his wall for a whole week. It was okay. I mean, and I never had an idea about art. I had an aunt in Jerusalem who was like a teacher at the art academy. But I never connected this to drawing. I never thought drawing was something. I never thought about art as a child.
What do you think it was? Do you think it was just that was so separate from any sort of connection to your life? Because that's how it was for me. I knew museums were places. My parents were even culture users, as you say in Danish, people who enjoyed going to art. But it never occurred to me that was a thing that anybody actually did. It just was. It happened. It was there.
I think it's very much like that. That as a child, it's like with, in the movie Silence of the Lamb, Hannibal the cannibal. He says the first rule of desire is that you desire the girl next door. That means you always desire things you see around you. If there is in your street a guy who's a mechanic and he's always under cool cars, then you desire to be a mechanic. You usually desire things that you have some connection to. And there were no real connection to any artist. I didn't know what kind of life that was, so I couldn't desire it. So not possible. And also drawing for me never went towards painting. It went towards cartoons. It was like about every Saturday to go to Valby Bibliotek, the library there, and which was this beautiful orange-yellow building, and then just take 20 cartoons, go home in your bed, have a piece of cake, and sit all day until you're not allowed to do that anymore, and just read one cartoon after the other.
Yeah, it's funny how that doesn't... Well, I guess also you have to think about art was in the 80s. It was different then. There wasn't as much an interest in... let's just say street art or a cartoon. Cartoons were separated from fine art much more than they are now.
Yeah, I mean, cartoons was a world of itself, and it was something you read in the newspapers, and you would buy these magazines. And I think if I ever fantasized about something when I was a kid, it was about doing cartoons.
Did you try, though?
I did cartoons on my own. There was even the smell of the 60s in my school, so I could also, instead of when you were asked to write something, sometimes they allowed me to make cartoons instead, which was quite successful. Which was
a great news, I imagine.
Yes, and because I couldn't spell, so I think that's also part of the reason why I kept drawing, that I could get some kind of success in school. I was the guy who could draw. And it also gave me some kind of social respect until around 7th, 8th grade. Then the respect stopped, because then you start getting grades. And the balance shifted in school, and suddenly it was not really cool anymore to be the guy doing drawings.
Sure, and the teachers also at a certain point expect you to grow up, quote unquote.
Something like that. Yes.
That was fun when you were a kid, but now it's time to get serious.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, kind of brutal. I think, much has been said about your trajectory through it, but I do you remember when it became art, quote unquote, for you? When you had ambition?
Yeah, there was many years where I was in and out of different kind of, like actually the same one private art school here in Copenhagen, and I really disliked it. I felt very limited, and as most young people, I couldn't also concentrate and focus. Actually, the only thing you can focus about when you're 19 is to jerk off.
That's about right.
And the art school was not about jerking off. This was about it was about focusing on different techniques. And
was it very serious?
It was quite serious.
Yeah.
It was a good school, but it was far over and it has nothing to do with my interest. It was about, art was suddenly about almost like school. Look at stuff lying on the table, try to draw them, see how a cup meets a table.
Right, do a good job.
Yeah. And I hated it. I hated it. I really didn't want to be an artist. And I'm not saying this in a romantic way. It simply didn't interest me.
Well, it can be miserable. That's the other truth about it.
Yeah, but it was not even about, it was simply I had no connection. I didn't have any pleasure of it. I didn't have any output from doing art. It was simply just an absurd game with a pencil.
So what happened? Where did it change?
I think actually more pressure. I think I got a child and I had no work, and I had a job in my father's company that I didn't like. So I suddenly, at a certain point, I say, okay, I'm going to do this now. I'm going to be an artist.
But financially, no smart financial person says, okay, I'm out of money. I'm under pressure. I'm going to try to make a career in art. You know, that's the news you always get.
Yeah.
It's basically impossible.
Yeah, that's true. But something almost like coincidence. I remember I went to see a dance performance of Zulu dancers. And they were jumping, they can jump pretty high. And suddenly this guy in front of me turned around, and he was with another person that I knew, and he says, "Did you ever teach art?" And I had never taught art, but I just said yes.
In the middle of this presentation?
Yes. I just faked it, and this person called Torben said, "Okay, I'm starting an art school tomorrow for unemployed people." So, I join you. And then we start, and that was also, end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, because it was a social democratic government, and there was a lot of unemployed people, and they could simply go into the social office and say, I have no job. And then the person there would say, don't you want to learn to draw and paint? So there would be these kind of...
money would fall into their lap.
Yeah. So I would be, me and Torben, we would teach these people, and that was really a good luck for me. Not only because I got money out of this job, I could survive, but also I had to start, I had to start talking about art. I had to pretend that I knew something. I had to actually know something about it.
Did you feel like a fraud?
Of course I did, because some of the kids were like 10 years old, and they were not kids, they were adults, and they were better at drawing than me. They would also apply for art school, for art academy, and they would get in, and I didn't get in. Everybody knew that I was also applying, and I didn't get in. My students, they got in. So it was all one big embarrassment. It was just embarrassing.
That's wild.
Yeah, but I learned from it, and there's a weird Danish word, I don't know the English word for that, ejerskab, that you take ownership.
Ownership, yeah.
You learn to take ownership because you're forced to that. And when you're going to teach people to draw, and they're better than you to draw, what are you going to do? You're going to take some kind of ownership over your own tragedy. You're going to,
sink or swim, as they say.
Okay, yeah, that's a good way of saying it.
Sorry, I keep hammering this point, but it seems like to me like there's this whole really like you became an adult around art. The dog is
going to bark. Just wait until he's done, because he left and then he's going to bark. Marker, come here.
Be like, why did you leave? Is it a sheepdog?
It's a sheepdog.
Yeah, people should stay together.
Yeah, it takes.
I know, buddy. But yeah, it seems like you grew up around art. Like you were a child, and at some point you decided you needed to be an adult, and art was the tool for that in a weird way.
I think when I went to this art school for 2 years, I learned a lot of stuff there, but I had no way of using it, and I had no way of connecting what I learned to the idea of expressing myself. It was like two different worlds. There was like the desire of expressing myself, whatever, and then there was all these things that I learned, and there was no connection.
Were you unhappy at that period?
I was quite unhappy. Yeah, I mean, I was actually. It was quite miserable actually, because you really want to connect to this, but I couldn't, and I could see all these other students around me that it was much more easy for them. They would sit down and they would go forward and backward, and I think usually, like we talked earlier about the perfect recipe for a bad party, or a perfect recipe for a boring or bad upbringing. I think I was also a perfect combination of somebody who would quit doing art. I think it didn't, actually in Danish you say it was not in the cards, because I got so many rejections, not really from the outside world, more from myself. But I think I got the rejection because I had such a big desire to have this private room, this room where I could juggle, talk, cut down things.
Under your own rules.
Yeah, just way of digesting the world of, today and yesterday and tomorrow. And you see people, if you walk around the lakes in Copenhagen, that's also something that hasn't always been like that. You see all these people running. And you look at them and say, why are they running? It's even not that healthy to run that much. So why are they running? And you look at their faces, they don't look happy. They don't look like they enjoy it. They don't even look like I'm putting pressure on myself to get better at running. It's not, they don't look focused like that. They just look miserable. And you understand that, it sounds very banal what I'm going to say, but it is kind of difficult to be a human being, because you have imagination and you have knowledge. You understand a bit about tomorrow and a bit about yesterday. So it is very easy to feel miserable. And you search for tools to deal with this. A tool could be to run and look very miserable.
To just sweat it out.
Yeah, or people after work go into their basement and they get lost looking at stamps from faraway countries, and then they dream about, the Ivory Coast. Or they get lost in other ways. But for me, it really became, when I was in my mid-20s, I understood what I came from. I came from this room of that drawing was not about, it was about what you need to do. What you as a person need to do, you sit down and draw. You put a piece of paper in front of yourself and that's what you start, like a very natural way. And I think from I was 18 when I left high school and I went to art school, and until I was around 28 when I was in art academy, I slowly started understanding that I wanted to create this room again, this room of sitting down and doing what I need to do. And around the end of my 20s, I could say I got a taste for it. I got a taste that would be possible. I remember I looked at my own work at that point and thought it's not very good. But then, I looked at other people's work and I thought that's not good either.
That's a big moment.
And then you understand, okay. And then you start this game and you start, one stone gets into your shoe. That means for me, a big stone in my shoe was like Philip Guston. That's a terrible stone to have in your shoe because
it hurts.
It hurts. And also because when you get another artist as a stone in your shoe, it means that you're dealing with a problem you can't solve. And actually that's the most important thing for developing as an artist, is to have these so-called problems. When you're teaching young artists, that's always what they're dealing with. And that's a difficult thing when you're teaching, is that you see what kind of problem, but you can't tell them how to solve it because you destroy the moment for them to learn. So for me, Philip Guston was a stone in my shoe because I was somehow looking for what I also mentioned earlier, the kind of place between language and drawing, where you draw a light bulb or a cigarette or a cup or a finger. And it is exactly what it is. It is a finger or a light bulb, but it's also something close to language, words. You can almost chew on them. And I really desired that in a very subconscious way. And then you see Philip Guston and you have the trouble because you have the answer to your question. But you cannot have other artists as an answer to your own questions.
Right, it's just the beginning.
It's just the beginning. And I think I spent 3 years getting Philip Guston out of my shoe. Then, in art school is about having all these stones in your shoe. And there's a bigger chance of killing your feet when you're in art school. And you need to develop some kind of brutality.
Over for yourself or over for everything? Or
towards taking stuff, being aware, okay, now I bumped into Kippenberger and Mike Kelly, the weird link between Cologne and LA. There was this beautiful, great moment in the late 80s, beginning of the 90s, where there was this bridge between Cologne artists that came out of a more political discussion, and then LA artists that was also political, but more American mainstream, burn down, low culture, whatever, trash.
Yeah.
But this was really great, being an art student and getting into all this, because it was close to cartoons. It was also more important, close to the life that you grew up in. It was art not growing out of fine culture. It was art growing out of whatever kind of suburbia you came from. Suddenly you understood that the suburbia you thought was more a distraction was actually the possibility. You understood that every ugly basement bar your uncle created out of silver foil was suddenly the perfect thing to turn into an artwork.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a great tool. And when I say you need to be brutal, is that you have to understand that every artist works from a method, and every method has an example. So what you can learn from other artists is not the example. It's more you go into the method. If you focus only on the example he used, then you are lost. Then you're just you get lost in the copy.
It's a loop.
It's a loop, but you can actually go into the method. You should understand, okay, what are they actually flipping? The way they flip stuff. How an artist would go 2 steps forward with something, half destroy it, and inject with something completely different. It's a certain kind of method that you can play around with. And the more you play with this, and you have to accept at the beginning you play with somebody else's method, you start building your own method.
Right, trying to copy it, but ending up doing it in your own way anyways.
Own way, and it's more obvious you get lost in that process. But also for me, people like Kirkeby had a very specific way of talking about art that for me was very generous. He would speak very high and very low same time.
This is the Danish artist Peter Voss Knude.
The Danish artist Peter Kirkeby. I think he was very important for me, the way he talked about art, the way he talked about method, about cutting things down, about how to fish in other people's work, to fish in your own work. And he spoke about, and he had part of his method also from Asger Jorn. So there was these people, and I think that's very important that you grow up in an environment where there are local people who manage to develop something. Because if it's only about people across the ocean, then it's very easy to become like just a tourist.
Right, a museum guest.
And that can be quite touching, but that's very rarely productive. You see a lot of European pop art, suburbia pop art, and through magazines. And if they took the ferry to New York in the in the 60s, and they saw pop art. And then they went back home and made, Cologne pop art, Helsinki pop art, Stockholm pop art. But it was always, the best you could say about it is that it was exotic. So,
which is a really, really awful thing to say, really, in a lot of ways.
It has a taste of something tragic. But if there are people in your city that manage to get their work over the average, it's more easy to learn from, even you don't know them. And I think Per Kirkeby was a very important character.
Did you have him as a professor?
Never.
Or you just met him?
I didn't know him. I only got to know him when I was an adult. But I studied, every etching, every kind of graphic work he did.
He's made a lot of works.
Yeah, and I took the books home from the library, and I couldn't get it. But also as an artist, I think as an art student, you deal with a lot of stuff that you don't understand, and that's very important. And it's also important that you quite quickly understand when you go to see shows in museums or galleries, it's not about judging whether you like it or not. That's actually very limited. You should just look at it. You should try to find out if there's something you can get out of it.
Jam it into your head forcefully.
Yeah, no, you should more think, is there something I can get out of this? Not, I don't like it. Oh, I like it. Because both things is like a closed party. If you like it, I like it. Yeah, but then it's done.
Right.
I don't like it. Then it's done. Just look at there's something you can bring back home.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me. I feel very connected to this story because it is similar to me. I feel like I didn't have a traditional course through becoming an artist. And I also didn't really get serious until I was about 29 or 30, similar to you. And for me, I realized it also came from a certain acceptance of the need for some sort of ego. And I mean that only in the most positive of senses, to have enough self-respect to say, this is worth fighting for, and what I do is actually of value somehow.
Yeah.
And you have to be very careful not to blow it up out of proportion. But you can spend a lot of time just cutting yourself down.
I think that when you are like an art student, a young artist, a young person trying to be an artist, it is actually in the beginning all about, you could say ego. I'm not sure any longer what ego actually means, but it's about having a place in the social circus. It's about
the social circus.
Yeah, it's about knowing what to say when you meet old people from school, family members. It's about when you are in a nightclub, in a disco. Nobody says disco anymore. But if you're in a disco and you meet somebody and they don't just ask what kind of shoes you're wearing, but they also ask what you do when it's daytime, you can say, I'm an artist. Or you can say, I'm a car mechanic, or I work in a shop, I'm in McDonald's. But you need to have this card.
It's such a loaded statement. I'm an artist.
Yeah, but it's also something different. Today, it seems like being an artist is quite a hipster thing. Artists didn't used to be a hipster thing. It used to be more like a nerdy.
Which is weird. You're generally just weird.
It's weird, and it's something where you smoke a pipe and you're wearing an Icelandic sweater. It wasn't really cool. It was more weird.
Yeah.
It's my father.
Man of the hour.
Man of the hour.
I've totally lost my thread. Where were we?
To have an ego and a social.
Right. For me, it was important because I've been embarrassed. I still am embarrassed to say I'm an artist to some degree, because for me it seems, dare I say, useless. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like it seems so. There's that great Danish word overflødig.
Yeah.
It's it's unnecessary. It's lying over the limit of what we need.
Yeah.
And of course, that's not true at all. We know this intellectually, but it still feels like I should be digging a well somewhere.
Yeah.
Or something. And so I had to come to terms with that. And that took me until my late 20s, early 30s.
But are you saying it about yourself now? I'm an artist.
Not always.
No.
Not always. it's mixed.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes because you just don't want to have that talk at the disco, so to speak, because it's it's the same as saying something hyper specific where people are like, well, what does that even mean? Then they want to know, like, how does this even, being an artist doesn't mean anything really. It means you make something, but they don't know. Do you make cartoons? Do you sell work in a gallery? Are you, it's a long discussion, so you may not even want to get into that. But it's also just, or I guess the question is it an identity?
I think it depends on the day. What day is it today?
Today would be Tuesday.
It's Tuesday. I would say I'm in the entertainment business. No, I think, even the Bible is entertainment.
Sure.
And entertainment can ruin your life. It can also create, completely new horizons. But I think art is also part of entertainment. And there are many different kinds of entertainments. There are entertainment that you hope you never looked at. And then there are entertainment that you are so grateful for. I don't know if it's... I'm quite unsure about all these words, like identity and ego. I think I always thought that it was like a coincidence that I became an artist. But then when you look back, you see that that's probably the only thing that could have happened.
Considering how many times you could have jumped off.
Yeah, but it's when you look back, everything always looks logic in a way.
Also
There's a
true.
way of seeing it as logic, but you could also see it in a different way and say it's just a coincidence. And I'm quite unsure about that.
Mm. But I mean, I guess the big question is, are you enjoying it? Why do we, I'm always obsessed with why do we keep doing what we do? Because drawing as a kid is fulfilling and fun, and being an artist can be fucking miserable. So where's the in between of being an adult in that?
I enjoy it tremendously. I think the older I get, the more I understand why I do it.
Mm.
I think it's simply a way of, you could also say it's a way of having a voice. It's a way of having power. Would be it would be a funny word to use, just because it is not really power. It's not more power than trying to fight Superman with a cup of coffee. But it feels like some kind of power. It feels like
personal power.
It feels like that you can talk back. Things that are talked, projected towards you. You can turn things around. You can chop things up and create new stories out of it. I think even though some of the works that I do are completely not narratives, completely abstract. You can't say what it is. It's all about narratives. You could also say narrative losing their ground.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the important part, is keeping going.
Far? Okay.
I think you come from a family of builders.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, to wrap it up, I guess the big question for me also comes back to teaching and passing it on in a way, because you have been very active in teaching.
Yes.
And you seem to have a lot of words about what you do. You are able to articulate. I've talked to other artists who just say, I can't even tell you why. They have no words for it. They can't write about it. They can't do anything. Does teaching help you personally, or is that more like giving it back to the world, or what does that mean for you?
I think teaching helps a lot.
Personally?
Because if you don't have a method of teaching, then you would have to look at other people's work like you look at your own work. You have to try to solve the puzzle. And it also helped developing a language. And I think the language, in the end, there's always a chance it might destroy you when you get language, because you become aware. And if you become more aware than you can digest, then you're gonna fall. But I think in most cases, to force yourself to talk about your work, to accept that you have to find your own way of doing it, is helpful. I completely understand people who don't talk about their work, who can't. But I think at least in art school, you have to try to do it.
They have a hard time there in that context.
Yeah, and there's also a difference between America and Europe. In America, whenever I've been in American art schools, they are much better talking. It's like much...
It's all you do, basically.
Yeah, if you go into a Danish or a German art school, where I have most of my experience, like in Germany, like it seems like all the people who doesn't want to talk about everything, they end up in art school. They think that they can hide there. And then you understand that it's about having, distance to your work. And when you talk, you get this terrible distance. But this terrible distance also help you to create works that can communicate beyond the private. And there are periods where you should talk, and there's periods where you should not talk.
Just like there's periods where you should make things and periods where you shouldn't make things.
I think that most of us get really tired of talking about ourselves. It just becomes like quite boring, and you start doubting. The more you ask questions about it, you actually start doubting your answers because you have said them more than once.
Right.
So you're not really sure anymore if the answers are just there in your pocket, or you really know why.
Right. What day is it? Like you said earlier.
Yes.
On Tuesday, the answer is like this.
Yeah.
But I mean, I imagine that teaching is also a way of not, of getting away from that, of getting out of the sphere of working alone. You spend so much time alone, etc., not talking, or at least talking in your head with yourself about it.
I think teaching is very intense. It's very intense, and it's I really enjoyed it. I did it like full time for 9 years.
It's a long time.
It's a long time, and I had a really good class in Düsseldorf where, I mean, if you have a good class, it's like having a village. And in this village, it start educating itself. There's so much information is in that environment. So many people who are on a track that other people start learning from that as well. And that you, as a teacher, become a little bit like not the main person there. You are more kind of from the side. In the beginning, you are in the front. Later, you are just more from the side. And
right, you watch them become themselves.
The thing is, constantly you have to reflect in new ways of what they are doing. But the things you have to say as a human being or as an artist, you can say that in a few days. After that, it's just not to bore people. You say it in different ways, or you make new variations, or you take what you already said and you try to connect it to somebody. Then you say it in another way. But basically, I don't think most people, whatever they have to say, they can say in a few days. That's it. But then, of course, people put an object in front of you, and you start enjoying the game of that. You have no clue what to say about this object. You don't know. You look at it and you feel completely alien. And then you start looking for a way in. And then you find, most of them you actually find a way. Maybe they say something, or you see something in the corner that's something completely different from this object that they placed in front. And you can create some kind of entrance to this object in the corner. And this game, I think I enjoyed that a lot. This embarrassment of feeling that you don't know what to say to this person. You have no clue. You are so clueless towards that object. You don't even feel like an artist. You feel like you don't feel like an artist. It's like the artist just left the building. And you just look at this blue object and you don't know what to say. And then you try. And you look for it. You find a way. You ask a question. They say something and you understand the gap between what they say and this object. And you start creating conversation. That is not... It is in a way entertaining for yourself, but hopefully also productive for the person behind the blue object.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
All right. Well, I have one last question. You have achieved, let's just say, let's not get into a discussion of that, but in the beginning, especially, there's that whole idea like, will I be able to make a career out of this? Will this even work, etc.? Do you have any thoughts on what continues to make to get out of bed in the morning? Because you could go back to bed.
Yeah, but it sounds like a terrible cliche.
It always does.
And it is a cliche, but it's never been the career that got me out of the bed. It's always been the puzzle. And the puzzle is still there. And it always creates new variations. It always creates new corridors where you want to take previous experience, take it down that corridor, or even let previous experience behind, say now this is over. There's all these farewell, all these goodbye, and all these hellos in this process, and this takes me out of bed.
And it's never done.
And if it is done, then you will never know. It will be maybe something that happened behind you. Also the fool never knows he's a fool before it's too late.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I very appreciate it.
I hope you can use it.
Absolutely. And thank you for listening to this episode and all the other episodes of the Undergang Armchair. The intro and outro music was kindly provided by Johnny Ripper, and today's interstitial music was provided by David Hyde. You can find links to their music and tons of other conversations with great people on our centennial celebration of a website, undergang.net. If you like this show or just feel like wishing us a happy 100 episodes, we would appreciate it if you'd take the time to leave a review on iTunes so others can find us. It helps tremendously. You can also tell a friend, put it on social media. Anything helps. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back soon.